So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you all here for our PAC Eco Excellence webinar. Today, we will uncover insight on proprietary data from Nielsen IQ team evaluating sustainable packaging trends. We're going to give people a couple of more minutes. It's 12:01, so let's give everybody another 2-3 minutes, and then we will start. Thank you. Okay, so let's start with our webinar. So one more time, thank you all for joining us, and thank you for joining us for this today's seminar of PAC Eco Excellence webinar with team from NIQ BASES. My name is Darko Martinovic, and I will be a moderator today. I'm a managing director of Wow Factor, as well as director of marketing strategies of companies Hughes Decor and Planet Group of companies. I have a great experience working with brands and bringing them to life for many CPGs and retails through packaging and the media. So I'm very excited to be here. Very briefly, I want for the people that don't know who PAC is to introduce PAC Global and hopefully invite people to join us. PAC Global is a trusted advisor for packaging leaders. We connect, collaborate, innovate, educate, and celebrate, and exists since 1950s. PAC Global is a non-for-profit corporation. We offer our members unparalleled value for a broad range of industries, initiatives, educational opportunities, packaging awards, competition, webinars, seminars, events, and much more. We have over 2,500 worldwide members, and we tap into our international audience with over 25,000 LinkedIn executive followers, 6,800 plus corporate followers, and growing database of over 7,000 industry contacts. So if you are not a member, we would really invite you to join our great team. Couple of events that are coming with PAC Global. On May 30th, it's the online webinar for PIP 360. It's a live user demo. On June 11th, we have in-person a full-day Disruptor Summit in Toronto, Canada. We would invite you all, those who did not assigned to come and participate in this event. It's a really amazing event. It's a whole day event for networking and learning a lot about what's happening when it comes to packaging and disruption. On June 13-14 is IFS PAC Secure Standard Industry Training. That's virtual. And on June 20th, Golden Design Rules Essentials. So please join these seminars. We will also have a Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions through the chat function box, and we'll address them as time allows, of course. Now, I would like to introduce our esteemed speakers today. So we have Francis Parisien, he's a Senior Vice President of Sales and SPM Canada, and Kate Zuckermeyer, VP North America Sales Lead Bases, PAC Lead NIQ Bases. So we're thrilled to have you here, and we're thrilled to have this kind of experienced team with us today. So without further ado, I will hand over to Nielsen IQ team to kick over things. So welcome and thank you for being here. So I'm going to turn it over to Francis first.
Thanks, Darko, and thanks to PAC for inviting us to do this webinar today. So let me just share my presentation. It's a real pleasure to be here today. We've done this in the past, and we want to continue doing this. Of course, you're not... Okay, so this is working now. So basically what we wanted to do is I'm going to do the market update part, and then I'll pass it over to Kati, who's going to talk about more specifically about bases and what we can do with packaging and trends around area. So I'm going to share, unfortunately, a few bad slides at the beginning. We're still seeing in Canada, and we're seeing it similar in the US, a bigger portion of consumers in this country saying that they're vulnerable. So basically, what you're looking at is a January 2023 and January 2024. You saw that last year, 30% of Canadians considered themselves vulnerable. We now see that being at 41%, with 29% being strugglers. That's a 10-point difference versus last year. Just not good news. So this is data from back in January. I know it's May, but it's still seeing in the market right now. So I'm going to share a few data points from that consumer outlook, and then we'll look at what's happening in sales right now. So there's 46% of consumers that tell us that are worse off versus last year. This is not the same chart as the previous one. It's a different question we've asked consumers. And we've asked consumers, why are you saying that you're worse off versus last year? 88% identify the increased cost of living as a factor of stress. 39% say it's the economic slowdown, and 29% say they're stressed about job insecurity and job losses in Canada. So all these factors are up versus the same period in 2023. So we're faced with a consumer that's a little bit more nervous at the beginning of the year, faced with a consumer that's concerned about rising prices. So 50% of Canadians are concerned about rising prices, and it's very similar to what we see in the US. What's different in Canada versus the US is that the increasing housing costs and the rising interest rates is back on the top 5 of consumers' concerns in Canada. So not good news, and it is rising versus what it was last year. So basically, we're faced with a Canadian CPG consumer who sees rising prices in the industry, but that's not the only thing that they're seeing. It's the cost of living that's going up in general in Canada. 89% of Canadian consumers are actively seeking lower CPG prices in this market. Of the percent of Canadians that say that will cut their expenses, 40% of Canadians will say that they will cut their expensive snacks and confectionery in the next 12 months. That's the highest of all the categories, followed by alcoholic beverages and HMR meals and kits. So you see that Canadians do want to cut down their expenses, and we'll see. I said it was a few negative slides. We'll see that in the upcoming slides of the presentation. There's good news, don't worry, but we're still faced with a consumer that wants to cut down expenses on CPG categories. Basically, if you're looking at inflation in Canada, again, same trend as we're seeing in the US. Inflation is down. We're down below 2% for the period ending April 20th, 2024. So we've seen like record levels at 10, like even over 10 at the beginning of last year. So we're now down to 2%, which is a more normal level for inflation for a CPG market. But basically, prices in Canada have increased more than 20% in the past 12 months. In the past 2 years, or the past 24 months. So you can see that there. And basically, what this chart is showing is that prices are, yes, inflation slowed down, but prices are not going down. So prices are staying up in the market. But Canadians, even though they identify rising prices as a high concern, are getting used to it. Unfortunately, I would say this is our industry, right? For the first time ever, if we're looking at the 12 weeks ending April 20th, unit sales are up in Canada for CPG products, which is actually very good news. Why is it good news? It's been down for the past 2 years. It's been down since the beginning of 2023. So unit sales are up versus a year ago. These decreases last year are pretty surprising, knowing that Canada's population has grown by 1 million people. To see unit sales should naturally go up, but Canadians and Americans faced with high inflation are just dropping their level of expenses. In fact, there's a lot of red if you're looking at the different departments here. When I do this presentation, I've done it a few times, I focused on the left side of this slide. there's like departments that are seeing their unit sales growing in Canada, which is actually good news. We haven't seen that much growth in the market in the past year and a half. So to see HMR, vegetables, fresh meat, fruits growing is actually good news in the Canadian market right now. Promotions are still very high in the Canadian market. We're still seeing more than 54%. Well, sorry, we're seeing 54% of unit sales being sold on promotion. This is the highest level we've seen in the last 25 years. We've never seen that much promotional activity in the market. Basically, retailers are just trying to attract consumers in their stores by boosting promotional activity. So when we're asking consumers, what is the most important factor when you're choosing a product in the aisle? Of course, taste will come first, but sales and promotions is now the second factor of choice for Canadians. And you'll see food labeling, and I know Kathy will talk about packaging trends afterwards. It's down the list, but sales and promotion got up on the top 5. It wasn't there last year. So again, pressured consumer looking for a better price. 45% of Canadians are not willing to pay extra for natural products. 57% are not willing to pay more for organic products. That's the latest consumer outlook that we have. And 73% are not willing to pay more than 5% for local products. So again, faced with a consumer that's restricting the number of categories and segments that they are buying in the market, and also switching brands or products to save. We're faced with a consumer that's less loyal. This is again Canadian numbers, but it's the same level of disloyalty, I would say. In the US, at 74% of Canadian consumers switching brands or products to save. And what's interesting from a category brand point of view is that back in the last recession in 2008, we saw premium products still keeping up and growing through the last big recession. We're not seeing that this time. What's growing right now is economic brands and private labels. So even premium products are under pressure in Canada and the US. 60% of Canadian consumers say that they're buying a greater variety of brands than ever before. And again, it ties back to what we're seeing with private label. Private label did slow down during the pandemic. And went back up right after when we got out of the COVID restrictions. At the beginning of the inflationary period, it went down because national brands were putting so much pressure on the market and doing promotions. But now Canadian consumers are back at buying private label, and it's growing in every province, as you can see on the right. Private label gaining momentum in the market. And 76% of Canadians plan to buy the same amount or more of private labels in the 6 months, and this in the next 6 months. And that will have implications in how national brands see the market and do their own planograms and their planning for next year. But it's also, there's great opportunities for brands to do things for retailers to do things differently. So 3 American examples of recent launches. The biggest one being Walmart launching Better Goods with like close to 200 products being launched in the American market. It's going to be better quality products at affordable prices. So not economic, not premium, just in the middle. So a lot of eyes focused on that launch for Walmart, one of the biggest in the last 10 years. Staples, the office supplier, launched Pick Me Up for employees going back to the office. So break room snacks specifically for offices. So pretty interesting. And then Kroger, a grocery retailer, boosting its beauty assortment by bringing exclusive brands from Australia. Again, a lot of activity on the private label front. We're faced with a consumer that, and this slide originally had like 80, this presentation originally had like 80 slides, so I cut it down. What I wanted to focus on now is that we're faced with a consumer that needs to make choices to save money. So they're cutting down on their restaurant expenses and spending more time in the kitchen, which is good. Well, if you're not doing food service, it's actually good opportunities for CPG brands to gain even more market share in the market. So 26% of Canadian consumers buy more easy to prepare and convenient meal items. And we can actually see that in the market right now. Okay, lamb is probably not your priority right now, but we see a lot of activity or growth of all the perimeter categories right now in the market. So we can actually see Canadians and Americans spending more time in the kitchen, less time at restaurants or fast food services because they're trying to save money by cooking more. 38% of Canadians have done meal prep and batch cooking in the past 12 months. It's even higher here in the province of Quebec. And they're also looking for easy to prepare categories, chili sauce, cottage cheese, frozen meat patties, lunch kits, flour. You see a lot of activity right now in categories which are typically flat, but now that are growing versus a year ago, as Canadians and Americans are looking for easier way to prepare meals. There's a lot of activity in the HMR counter right now too, so oatmeal replacement. A lot of opportunities there for brands and retailers to do a better job servicing clients. What consumers are telling us, I'm not going to cook 7 days a week. Send me not send me, but give me simple solutions to prepare meals or serve meals for my families. Big opportunities for brands and retailers out there. Talking about retailers, a lot of Canadians right now are switching stores to reduce their expenses. Saw news recently that even Target in the US is having a tougher time attracting clients. It's all about discount right now. Discount is growing by 10% versus conventional stores by 1%. Dollar stores are attracting more people in Canada. Grocery discounts such as Super C, Maxi, No Frills, Food Basics, Freshco are growing 12%, while conventional stores are declining. Mass merch, that's Walmart for us in Canada, growing 8%. Ethnic stores, typically lower price items at 8%. So you see a lot of consumers trying to save money, switching to discount stores. And that's going to have a lot of implications for our industry. Typically, discount stores offer a lot less items. So you're going to see like different assortment, less opportunities for premium products and so on. So pretty interesting what we're seeing right now. We are faced with consumers that are planning their budgets. They're preparing shopping lists in advance for shopping. They're planning ahead before they shop to manage spending. And they always compare prices before choosing. We're also seeing new concepts coming up, and this is not typical of Canada or specific to Canada. Seeing that in the US too. So liquidation stores are opening regularly across the country, across the continent. So we see they first started as treasure hunt destination for Amazon returns, but now they're selling your regular CPG products. A few examples here from Quebec. So basically what they're telling consumers is we're not wasting products. We're offering them at really cheap prices. It's your best way to save money in the market right now. So we're seeing a lot of activity right now. Just moving ahead with we've talked about different brands, we've talked about different categories. There's 62% of Canadian consumers that are switching between sizes to save money. Again, implications for packaging, and I don't know if Caddy will talk about that specifically, but 49% of Canadians are looking for larger economy size, and then 15% are looking for smaller pack size. But right now, the focus for Canadians is finding larger economy sizes. Not all Canadians are able to go to Costco, so there's opportunities for brands and retailers to do it differently in regular stores. Again, and I'm skipping ahead and I'm going quickly, but I'll send more information afterwards if you're looking for more details. But 24% of Canadians are skipping meals to save on food expenses. So that's also putting pressure on the different players in the industry right now. 39% of Canadians stop buying certain products to focus on essentials. So again, a lot of pressure on the industry to understand what essentials are for Canadian consumers. And basically, typically the families that are sticking to essentials right now are the bigger families, younger, below the age of 44, with lower income and with kids. And there's a lot of South Asians that are part of the typical essential category buyers. So again, there's a group of consumers out there that need to focus on essential categories. Again, that's going to have an impact on how retailers do in the market and how brands deal with these restrictions right now. And again, I'm going through this really quickly because I wanted to share a lot of information, but I want to give Kathy some time to talk about what's happening in packaging and with Bases right now, because this is, again, a webinar that we're doing for PAC. So going to skip ahead these slides, but if you need more information, reach out. Basically, what we're showing here is that households who need to focus on essential categories are showing really different shopping patterns right now in Canada. And this is very specific to the period that we're seeing right now. We've never really seen this. I've been with the company 25 years, and it's the first time we see differences between how consumers are shopping in the market. So if you need more information, I'll send that shortly. But again, just to focus on essential categories, and then I'll pass it over to Kathy. Companies and retailers playing in essential categories need to protect and build market share. You need to understand price gaps, and you need to understand your competition, especially with private label. There's a promotion game to be played with essential categories, but you need to plan that wisely. Again, not a big surprise, but focus on discounters. All Canadians visited the discounter in the past 6 months. Discount is on everyone's lips right now, so it is very important. And have a targeted golden SKU list for essential categories. And if you're in the non-essential categories, you need to understand who your every category consumer is. You need to innovate quickly, and that's Bases' strength. So I don't know if Kathy's going to talk about innovation shortly, but there's still room for innovation in the market. But you have to do it wisely. You need to understand your consumers, and you need to develop a communication and innovation strategy to build back penetration for these categories. And with that, I would pass it over to Kathy. Kathy, all yours.
Great, thank you. I will get the next set of content on the screen. And here we go, right? So today we're going to transition and talk specifically about packaging and a trend that's not going away, sustainability, right? And so if we think about sustainability in relation to packaging, it's both using packaging to tell a sustainability story, but packaging itself can also be the sustainable vehicle, right? So the material, the function, the form of the pack itself. So we'll be touching on both of those today, but how do we make sure to execute a more sustainable pack with the consumer in mind? And so we're wanting to first start with understanding, what does sustainability mean to our consumers? And so we did a global survey to assess, what the key meaning of sustainability is across the globe. And, by and large, similar answers. I think it's interesting, in North America, we saw more of a push for the general better for the planet alignment, a little bit more specificity perhaps required in other regions. But I think that what that tells us is there's a really broad range of what people are associating with sustainability. And that also gives brands a lot of leeway to kind of claim, to kind of say that they are doing something that is sustainable, because it doesn't necessarily have to go under one umbrella. There's not just one definition. In general, if we're doing something that's better for the planet, that's where we're starting to get credit for it. And the reality is that, sustainability is something that is important to shoppers across the globe. We say that we want to do better, right? There's always, we inherently know that there's a measure that we can take as consumers. And so, how they know that they want to make sustainable choices when they can, it's really an important priority for some. But they're looking for brands to help them along this journey, right? Because we can say that we want to do things, but the actual action of it, how do we do it? Sometimes that can be difficult. And, you know, while there are more and more brands out there that are, you know, driving sustainability through their products, through their efforts, through their packaging, oftentimes that's not necessarily translating to, you know, shoppers buying it more, or them being able to kind of see that impact that they're making. There's, you know, comments that the sustainable shopping is not necessarily considered easy. There's perceptions that sustainable options are perhaps inferior. They might be more expensive, right? We just heard how price sensitive the marketplace is right now. So I think, you know, as brands, we're really wanting to see how can we make sustainability more accessible for consumers? How can we make it more obvious? And how can we make sure that they are along the journey with us, that there's no downside, there's no perceived trade-off as they move into a more sustainable choice, that they can actually feel good about purchasing our product because it has a tie to a sustainability benefit that is well known, that they are aware of, and that can support their purchase decision. And so what we're going to do today is think about the consumer's mind, get inside the consumer's mind as they're going through their shopping journey to understand how we can design sustainable packaging in order to connect and to reach with our shopper who wants to do the right thing, who's interested in a more sustainable choice, but it might be finding some hiccup along the way. And so we'll be looking at this within the context of the shopper journey. So, you know, really thinking through all the different touch points, all the different mindsets that a shopper might be in as they are, you know, interacting with a category, interacting with a product, both in store and in their home. And so we'll think through, you know, jobs of a pack when a shopper's first coming to a category, thinking about things like, how does this actually drive shoppers to it? Can it stand out still amongst the clutter? When we're getting a little bit closer into the shelf, how can a pack convey its point of difference? Is sustainability the point of difference that it wants to lead with within the category? How do they do that? And then ultimately, when we're, you know, close into the pack, perhaps we have it, you know, right in our view, we're reading all of the pack details. How does that support and provide reassurance to give us, you know, the reassurance that while it's a sustainable product, it's also got the quality and benefits that I'm looking for. And we'll also think about, you know, at this point, they might be touching the pack too. So the in-hand experience as well. And then we'll talk about too the job of a sustainable pack at home. What does it still need to do? And I think, you know, we often overlook sometimes the shopper journey and we say, well, once it's in your cart, then we're good to go. But I think in particular, as we're thinking about a sustainable package, oftentimes there's a really critical role that needs to happen at home once it's in their house. And so talk through some of the things that we need to think about to round out the shopper journey to make sure that as we're developing sustainable packaging, it's really breaking through and hitting on these key points and interactions that is naturally meeting the shopper across the journey. And when we're doing packaging research, right, because that is the world that we live in, especially as we're thinking through sustainable packaging, we want to look at it through different lenses to make sure that we're hitting on those key jobs of a pack across the shopper journey. And so we're wanting to look at things like, can they see it, right? When a shopper sees it, how are they seeing it at shelf? How are they seeing the look of the pack? How are they experiencing it? So this gets, you know, not just into the visual, but into the tactile impact as well. And then perceptions, what are they associating with it? And there's a variety of ways that we can conduct research to hit on these, you know, key pillars of see it, experience it, and perceive it. But what we're going to highlight today is some R&D that we had conducted where we wanted to focus specifically on a few different trends that we saw with sustainable packaging. One of them in particular was the move from plastic to paper packaging. We know that that's something that's popping up across categories. And so wanted to see what is the impact as people see it, as they experience it, as they perceive it. And we're leverage our neurotechnology, so EEG, measuring directly from the brain, before a consumer can even articulate it, measuring perceptions and experiences that perhaps they're not even aware of, but that do drive our behavior. We know neuro can be a really powerful tool to understand nuance, processing, and those indicators that really impact our behavior. Considering emotional motivation is something that we're measuring directly using EEG. Are they drawn to it? Memory activation, is it making a connection, right? That's both encoding and retrieval of information. So is this actually, something that's making a connection that I'm driving new memories with, or is this connecting with something that exists in my framework today? And attention processing, how hard am I having to work to process this? Am I making it easy for my consumer to kind of engage with? And then we'll also look at message resonance. So kind of at a non-conscious level, what ideas, what perceptions are being evoked and to what degree. And then you'll also see sprinkled throughout today survey, right? So we still love to talk to our consumers. We want to see what are their perceptions. How do changes in packaging, how do communications on packaging impact, their perceptions, the credits that brands are giving, are being given. And so you'll see some data sprinkled with some insights in the next few sections out that we'll go through perhaps in the next 20 minutes or so. So starting with the first part of the shopper journey and the first lesson that we want to talk through as we think about developing sustainable packaging and having it be a consumer-centric lens that we're thinking through. And so the first piece of advice that we're going to talk through is a little bit of a word of caution. So I think a lot of the sustainable conversations, they focus on how claims are coming to life, or maybe the usage and functionality of a package. And those are all important, and we're going to talk about those in the subsequent sections. But those are not the first battle that a package needs to really pass in order to be considered, be even put in the consideration set for our consumers. And so, the first one really is be seen, stand out. So it's really simple, but we want to be thinking as we are making changes to our packaging, that our changes are not eroding this, the visual presence of the product at shelf. And so what do we need to keep in mind when doing so? Of course we want to test this, but I think there's principles that we can even just come to the table with as we are thinking about our packaging and how our changes to it may impact how we show up at shelf. And so, I think starting with the, principles of what actually drives shoppers to a package at shelf. At this moment in time, the shopper is really, on autopilot. They're looking at their list. They're trying to just get through the store, and they're inundated with hundreds, thousands of messages, so they're not going to necessarily take in every single item. So at this initial approach, they're really going through a process of natural deselection. The brain is kind of telling us what's important, what they can, avoid, and what they should hone in on. And the cues that they're using at that point in time are the most simple, the most elementary cues that really are inherent to and what guides our focus. It's things like color, things like the size or shape, patterns, words, numbers. So the most simplistic information is what the brain gravitates to and what impacts what the brain gravitates to. And so what's the implication for sustainable packaging? Well, if we think about some of the key ways to execute sustainable packages, one of them might be material reduction. So while this might be a fantastic sustainable effort, we do want to think about, as we reduce material, are we reducing our presence at shelf? Have we changed the size, the shape of our physical product? Have we kind of minimized some of our presence versus competition? If so, we need to come up with ways to overcome that. Another way that we might also cue sustainability might be through colors, because again, that's something that we've made these natural connections with Oftentimes we're leveraging a little bit more muted, earthy tones, which can be fantastic to support the sustainability message, but we want to think about how we're leveraging colors within the context of the category. Have we diminished our presence? Are we still aligning with the color cues necessary in order to kind of be in that initial consideration set with the category? So thinking, as we're developing our packaging, as we're designing our packaging, making sure that we're also thinking about how these changes are impacting how we show up within the broader context to make sure we have the opportunity to tell our sustainability story. Okay, so let's assume we've gotten past that first hurdle. And now shoppers are, kind of scanning the different packs on the shelves. They're looking for something that speaks to them, right? So it's not about the small details really at this point. They're looking for a package that, is differentiating in a way that is aligning with their goals, their expectations, and their priorities for that particular product. But this is also a place where sustainability can have a really great impact and can be part of that pack story. And so, we would think, if someone is at this point looking for a sustainable package, something that is better for the environment, shouldn't that be really easy for them to spot? Well, our research shows that it's not, right? So while we have a shopper who's intending to look, for a more sustainable, better for the planet option, we find that, a good portion of them aren't able to find sustainable options at shelf. So as companies, as manufacturers, we're not necessarily making it easy for our shoppers to find what they're looking for if they are looking for a more sustainable option. And I think what's notable from this data is that the number is actually up from several years ago. And so if we think about the trends in the market, there's actually more products out today that would align with, a more sustainable pack or more sustainable product or company, but still we're not able to find it and get that message across. And so, key takeaway here is use your pack to tell your sustainability story. We know that packaging is such a critical asset, something that reaches 100% of consumers at that critical point of purchase. So use the package to proudly tell your story. If this is something that, you can claim, then, if shoppers are looking for it, you need to make it easy for them to actually see. So leverage the front of your pack, because when executed well, your sustainability story is going to be noticed and it's going to be embraced. And how do we know that? This is the first piece of research that ties back into, that paper versus plastic R&D that we have conducted. And we did so using two different categories, two different brands, both which had options that were, more traditional in the plastic, as well as an alternative package that was paper that also included prominent claims that spoke to its sustainability efforts. And so what we're looking at from a data perspective is the relative shift in brain processing, brain engagement, when shoppers are just looking at the plastic versus the paper version of each of the products. And so in this case, we saw both for the deodorant category as well as the chocolate category. When shoppers looked at the more sustainable paper package with a prominent claim on it, we actually saw significantly higher engagement. Again, this is from a non-conscious perspective. So it's telling us that shoppers are more drawn, more interested. It's telling a stronger story to them when they're seeing a package that has the sustainability claim and perhaps could already, showcase that it is of a different material. And I think what was interesting is that, executions aside, they were quite different. The claims also that they presented were quite different on each of the packs as well. On the deodorant pack, we have a more functional claim, 100% plastic free. And we saw that pack actually, the strength of the paper pack compared to the plastic was really driven more by memory, right? So this is a claim that kind of made this easy connection with shoppers, encoded, and kind of what was easy for shoppers to gravitate to and to really connect with, if you will. The chocolate packaging, again, ultimately landed in a place that was more engaging for the shopper, but worked a little differently. It had a claim that, again, quite prominent, but spoke to the consumer in a bit of a different way and kind of in layman's terms. I'm paper, recycle me. And the impact there of the kind of modalities that this package was really working on is it was stronger on emotional motivation. So that tells us that shoppers were really drawn to this. There was something that was really speaking to the shopper for that paper version of the chocolate bar. So, there's different ways to give your message to achieve a stronger pack. But ultimately, this tells us that when we have a sustainability story on pack, and if executed well, it's embraced. And again, this is from a non-conscious perspective. And we saw through survey that the brand was getting also more credit, right? So explicitly, we saw gains from a more sustainable pack, inclusive of a sustainable message and perhaps perceptions of the actual product material itself. So the brand is going to get more credits. The brand's going to have a stronger story if we're able to, tie to sustainability, if we're able to, kind of tell them something more. It's not just going to be attributed to the product. The brand is going to start to get credit as well. Okay, so if we're thinking about, let's tell our story on the front of the pack, it's such a strong vehicle. If the case is that we are actually changing the material, the size, the form, the function of the package itself, we really need to make sure that the execution ladders up to desired traits and doesn't leave anything to be desired. And so going back to this same case where we're thinking about the chocolate and the deodorant packaging, wanted to kind of provide that juxtaposition. When we did our research, we first measured when shoppers looked at it, how were they responding? So that was the data we had just looked at, right? Story there. When they just looked at it, they were a lot more engaged. So thinking about the in-store impact, sure, they could be more drawn in. They might be more likely to pick it up, right? Now, we also then measured how was the brain responding when they picked up the package, because we know, especially as you're dealing with pack materials, the actual feel in hand is something that is critical and that we want to make sure to assess, because that is also still part of the consumer buying process. And the story here is that for the chocolate packaging, when shoppers actually had the paper package in hand, the experience was greatly diminished compared to the traditional plastic packaging. And so that tells us that the in-hand feel of this pack did not live up to expectations. There was a bit of a miss. Something, caused a disconnect, an inherent disconnect for the shopper when they put it in their hand. So, we'll really need to make sure that execution doesn't, cause those moments of pause. Moments of pause are, can translate to, putting it back on the shelf, and we ultimately don't want that. I think the other really interesting thing here too is, again, we were measuring perceptions from a non-conscious perspective, and we saw perceptions of premiumness and actually perceptions of sustainability went down for the paper compared to the plastic. And it might sound a little counterintuitive, but this thicker, more rigid material, it doesn't feel as premium, and more material inherently perhaps doesn't cue sustainability naturally to the brain. They might know it's sustainable, but does it feel that way? In this case, we saw that it didn't. And just as a comparison with deodorant, so the story here is not that you can't execute sustainable packaging or you can't move to paper packaging. You absolutely can. With deodorant, we actually saw that paper package actually landed in feel a stronger, more engaging experience. So executed well, it can ultimately create a product benefit to our consumers. We also want to take from that context matters. Perhaps it's a little bit more common, accepted, there's not as much of a hurdle to get over for some categories versus others. So, I think really understanding the consumer perceptions and reaction to different packaging for, within the context of your category is going to be critical as we move into a more sustainable pack. So another thing that we want to look at too, if we're thinking about what the shopper's doing as they're considering, is this a product for me? Is this right? Do I want to buy it? It's all about reinforcing other benefits of, sustainable packs. So we know sustainability is important, but we also acknowledge it's not everything, right? And again, kind of going on the conversation of affordability isn't critical. We know that when we're making purchase decisions, affordability is, trumps it all. But there's also things like, what are we looking from our packaging? We're looking for safety and hygiene, healthier options, for trusted, familiar brands. So, I think that the way to get a sustainable packaging across is to connect it with another benefit, right? So we can get a personal benefit to our purchasing decisions. And, a couple of cases that had done that well, it makes us think of, how do we give that sustainable message? How do we put that across? Is it just saying I'm sustainable? That's probably not enough, right? Thinking about in terms of then what's the benefit to the consumer? Because ultimately the consumer is a bit egocentric, right? They want to know what's in it for me. And again, if they've got the intention to do the right things with a more sustainable pack, still the short-term benefits are always going to come into play. So as much as we as brands can make it easier for them, then that's better. And in both of these cases, we have, the sustainability message is more about the benefit, right? It's more compact, but it doesn't have any less product. And I think that was a similar message across both of these. So providing reassurance that we're not getting less, providing tangible benefits that it takes up less space in our house. And we've got cues, the color cues of green are telling us that this is sustainable, right? So there's ways to get this message across that are less brand centric and more consumer centric. That's what we want to really think about. And I know that, we had just talked about the comment on economy size, product actually being something that is more of a trend and that shoppers are looking for. So that's almost at odds with this compact, but we can also, there's ways to communicate then what's the benefit of that too. And is there a way to tie some of that with sustainability too, right? You might be buying less, using less material if you're, having to buy fewer options. So, tying sustainability to an ultimate additional benefit for the consumer is a way to really get that message across. Okay, and so two more things that we want to really think about. What we've talked about so far is, everything to kind of guide the consumer decision in store, but we also want to think about sustainable packaging from the lens of what do we need to have it do at home. And, one of the key things is ultimately protect the product. And so, as you're changing the pack form itself, if that is the avenue towards sustainability or the material, we do need to provide the reassurance that the product itself can still hold up the product, that the safety and the hygiene is not discounted in this case, because we saw that safety and hygiene is still a critical factor here. And this was a case where, they weren't talking about sustainability on pack, but ultimately it was a sustainability move. They had removed the packaging from, they went from a, secondary package to just, a primary package, but had clear reassurance of, where we could see the resealable nature of the pack. And they chose to differentiate and tell their brand story in other ways of what they're doing more, something that's more consumer centric, but, kind of in the background, still driving home a sustainable package that reassures shoppers that it is still effective and hygienic and safe. And so another piece of data that we wanted to talk through too is, as we're removing packaging, what we need to think about that primary packaging doing, the role that needs to still tell. And, in this case, we had seen that while we were looking at a premium brand, this premium brand really, was coming to life through that secondary package. But when the secondary package was removed, if executed well, the primary package still aligned with the brand, had strong premium perceptions, product expectations were still in hand. So, I think it's also, as we're removing product, making sure that the graphics are still coming to life in a way on the package that evokes what we're trying to convey as a brand. Okay, and so the last piece that we want to talk through today is that, if we're rounding out the journey with the package, they've got it in home, they've consumed the product. Now, what do they do with it, right? And so this is where I think one of the biggest hurdles comes when we're actually developing sustainable packaging, especially when it requires a behavior change. And so, shoppers say that it's really inconvenient and can be time consuming. So again, they want to do the right things, but we kind of also want quick solutions. So what do we need to do as brands, as manufacturers, to make it easy for them? And I think it's just providing clear guidance, right? We're all going through this sustainability journey together. We, have to learn how to do it in the right way. We don't know what materials and, which ways to dispose of products is correct and is actually going to make an impact. And, likely our consumers are not Googling this every single time they're consuming our product. So through our product, we need to actually, tell them what to do when a behavior change is needed. That's how we're going to create impact. And that's how they're going to feel good about learning something, kind of having a brand partnership that's guiding them on their sustainability journey. So use your package when we need to actually convey clear guidance of a behavior change. Use that to communicate it. Okay, so kind of a quick revisit of what we've talked about today. And again, it's all about, thinking about sustainable packaging, but how do we do so? What do we need to think about to make sure that sustainable packaging is effective and works for our consumer? And so it's all about what are the different touch points, the lenses that a consumer is going to, be experiencing our package through. So the first one, as we're thinking about sustainable packaging, we really need to make sure that these efforts visually do not, erode our presence at shelf or in the context where we're going to be first presented, with our consumer. Call out sustainability claims on the front of the pack. Powerful vehicle, shoppers want to see it. Let's also ensure that the execution of the material ladders up to desired traits, right? So we need that in-hand feel to actually, align with and create a positive experience. Otherwise, we're going to create some of a disconnect and maybe a bit at odds or won't be as accepted. Let's also think about what we're communicating, reinforce other benefits of sustainable packs. So less about being brand centric of I am sustainable and more about being consumer centric of what's the benefit to them. Also make sure that it just meets the consumer needs. So as we're changing materials, let's make sure that the storage, the execution of the product is still protecting the product itself, because that's what people are ultimately buying. And then when there's, from a disposal perspective, when we need to create a behavior change, use the package to provide clear guidance, because we're on this journey together. And, really ultimately, this is where the brand can help guide the shopper and the consumer at the time of disposal and what to do. So thank you. I know we're just about time. I think we might have a few minutes for questions. So any questions that you have today, we can talk through it, but also have left my information here if there's anything you want to follow up on in the future.
Well, thank you, Katie. Thank you, Francis, very much on an amazing presentation. I do have a couple of questions that we can quickly answer. There's a question here, how to claim sustainability effort on front of pack when there's a risk of greenwashing?
It has to be authentic, right? And I think that's where, we do want to test this ahead of time. I think we want to make sure that there's trust, that there's authenticity, and that it's not going to backfire. I think it's also looking about what's going on in the category. Is this something that's differentiating you? Are you just trying to kind of keep up with everybody else, or is this a message that you can authentically claim? So I think that it's a very valid question. And that's where we want to know is, are you going to get benefit, or is this actually something that could backfire? And we can do that through research.
Okay, that's great. I have another question. How are retail responding to growing needs for sustainable packaging options? Do you have any data there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of different lenses of how it impacts retailers. Retailers themselves also have their own packages, so I think they also have their own battles to go through. But you know, it also comes down to shelving, shelf space, how that impacts, you know, how a product's going to show up too. So I think they have all different types of battles, whether it be the packaging material, how does that hold up on shelf? But I know there's more of a conversation that's being, you know, had between brands and retailers in order to kind of move along this, because it's happening more and more. And, you know, I think, you know, we'll see.
In my experience, I've seen these certain retailers pushing back on, for example, blister packs and saying that
Yeah.
it's not the most sustainable option. Go back, redesign your pack, and come back with more sustainable options. So there is definitely an influence of retailers pushing back on CPGs and saying, yeah, that's not going to work for us, and give us evaluation, give us a better solution for more sustainable options. Those goals of the retailers, I guess, are very important to take in consideration as you're bringing your product to retailers. Another interest, I don't know if you can explain it here, but how can companies use your neuro data to improve their sustainability packaging design?
So the way that we typically would recommend is actually testing your package, right? I think there's learnings that can be had that can get to general principles and understanding, but there's nothing like the actual feel of an actual package. So we work with clients on an ad hoc basis as they're going through their sustainability journey or other packaging research to actually measure that specific in-hand impact.
Oh, that's great. So I think this is it for now. Questions. There's some other questions coming in, but I would totally encourage everybody on the call to forward all the questions directly to Francis and Katie, or you can forward your questions through Lindsay and PAC organization, and we'll be more than happy to reply to you. I want to thank Nielsen team, Katie, yourself, and Francis for dedicating your time and sharing this amazing presentation to us. And thank you all the participants that joined today on this call. I know we have people all over the globe, so thank you one more time. And I want to close the meeting today and have a great the rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great